Hi, I'm Scott with Cat Family Records.
Hey, I'm Nick.
My name is Nove. I am with Redstone Records.
This is the first workshop in an ongoing monthly series. Today, we're going to start by talking about home recording on a budget. First, we're going to go over some equipment that you need. Then we're going to go over room preparation, and then some basic recording techniques.
Okay, so here's what you're gonna need. First off, since you're watching this, we assume you already have a computer.
So this computer will need a DAW, which is short for Digital Audio Workstation. Now, a DAW is a powerhouse. This is something that you can produce, record, engineer, mix, master, so many different things on so many different levels.
Next, you'll need an audio interface.
In my hand, I have one of these interfaces. This is the around, 200, 150 area. The Sapphire Pro 24. Again, Focusrite is a great company. Great sound on a budget.
Continuing, you'll need a microphone. For a one mic setup, we recommend a large condenser. For a two mic setup, you can do two large condensers or one large condenser and an SM57. And for a four mic setup, we recommend two large condensers and two SM57s. To use these microphones, you'll need one XLR cable per mic. To connect instruments directly to your interface, you'll need 1/4-inch cables. You'll need mic stands and mic clips, a pair of headphones for recording, a pair of monitors or a second pair of headphones for mixing and monitoring, headphone adapters, a vocal shield, a pop filter, and last but not least, an outlet tester.
Alright, so now that we've gone over an equipment list and you've scoured Craigslist and Amazon and you've put together your home studio, let's talk about actually preparing your room to record. The first thing you want to do is actually find the best sounding room in your home. To do this, we use something called the clap test. So the clap test is basically in the name. You walk around your house, room to room, and you clap. And you're listening for two things, fluttering echoes and reverb tail. These are fluttering echoes, and this is a reverb tail. You basically want to find the driest room in your home. And what I mean by that is a room where it seems kind of quiet when you are having a conversation, right? A room where you don't have a lot of hard surfaces like rock or glass or hard corners that introduce some nastiness into your recording that you want to cut out. In addition to the clap test, we just like to have conversations or play an instrument or sing in a room and pick the room somewhat subjectively where we think it has kind of the best natural sound. So we're assuming if you're on a budget like us, you don't have hundreds or thousands of dollars to spend on treatment, like foam, bass traps, etc. So you do have to be careful about purchasing cheap foam because typically it only cuts out the high frequencies and it leaves a lot of the bass in mud. An easy solution, something that you probably do have around the house, is furniture. Furniture and mattresses. It might sound crazy, but we typically just throw those things in the corners of our rooms. You could throw a couch in a corner, take your mattress, throw it in a corner, maybe put a sheet on it first if you have a guest over, use a couch, use other chairs. You want to do two things though, right? You want to pack out your corners, you want to try to absorb a full range of frequencies, but you also want to introduce some chaos. So sometimes when you go to a recording studio, you'll see these wooden blocks that have random shapes cut out. And maybe you've wondered, what is that? Well, it's designed so that you don't create constructive interference in your room. So if you're in a square room, for example, and you're talking, those waves, if they don't have a chance to be deflected or absorbed somewhere, they're just bouncing back and forth constantly, right, and creating interference. That's not what you want to record. You You want to introduce some random elements, some chaos to sort of break up those waves, and you also want to absorb as much as possible. A lot of these get trapped in corners, which is why it's better to throw the furniture you have in the corners. It'll make a huge difference in the room. Once you've treated a room, you're still not ready to record. There's one more step. We have to find a properly grounded outlet. So you can buy something like this, an outlet tester at Home Depot for about $4, and it's super easy to use. You just plug it up and it tells you if your outlet is grounded or not. If you have an ungrounded outlet, you could potentially introduce line noise that becomes impossible to get rid of. You have to keep in mind that all of the noise that you're introducing with your lines and your cables just gets amplified when you are processing, right? So when you add effects, when you add in-the-box reverb or delay or gain, etc., saturation, you're just amplifying that noise. So we want to try to reduce those noises as much as possible, and finding a properly grounded outlet is step one in that process. Step two, of course, using good cables. We recommend Mogami cables with Nutric ends, shown here. You can buy them on eBay, much cheaper than Guitar Center, and it's definitely worth it. If you're gonna spend money on mics and interfaces, and you're trying to get a professional recording, you have got to also pair that equipment with the proper cables. If you're using cheap Guitar Center cables and recording with an expensive mic, you're not gonna get great products. Another thing to keep in mind with using a large condenser microphone is that they pick up everything. Literally a conversation someone is having in the shower will shine through with a large condenser microphone. I know that from experience. So what you want to do is make sure your refrigerator is probably turned off, your AC. If someone's being really loud outside, maybe offer them a Starbucks gift card to reduce that volume. But keep in mind that things that may sound quiet to you, again, are going to be amplified by a large condenser. Remember, the goal here is to capture the cleanest signal possible. It's not good to rely on yourself in the mixing phase to take out noise, to clean something up. You want to get the best raw material possible, and that starts with the room, that starts with the outlets, that starts with the cables, it starts with actually plugging things up and the preparation process. So you have to make sure your prep is there first, and then you're ready to record.
Your vocal setup is going to contain 3 basic parts: a vocal shield, your mic obviously, and then a pop filter as well. What I like to do is just, without having anything plugged in, no pressure, just have the singer sort of sing as if they're going to record. So just have them, get them into position, an initial position, and then just see what they do. Artists there'll be natural movements. Sometimes, they may sway from side to side, or, they may move up or down. So that's going to be really important to take note of, because you may have to actually angle your vocal mic a little bit higher, a little bit lower, because you want them going dead on into the center of the mic. So once you've taken a look at, how the singer is going to perform, one really important thing that we like to do is kind of create a boundary with the pop filter. So you'll notice some artists, they may come in a little bit too close to the mic, or they may even be a little bit too far back. And so one way you can curb them coming in too close is you can actually place the pop filter about 6 inches away from the mic, rather than having it on top. Put it a little further away. And so you may be wondering, what is the pop filter for? So that is for reducing plosives. So that's going to be your S's, your S, and your P sound. In a natural environment, these won't be an issue, but you will notice almost immediately in a vocal performance, if there are any words that have a hard S or a hard P sound, you're going to hear a very sort of sharp, very undesirable sound come into your mic. So we've shown you how to best prepare your room, but it still may not be ideal. And so the vocal shield will basically be your prepared room. In a nutshell, it's going to reduce the influence of the room.
A lot of techniques that I personally seen and that I personally use in all my sessions is the 5-finger separation. What we do is that we use the palm of our hands, and from the thumb, we take it and we measure it from our lips into the end of our palm. Now, this is the direction that you should have on every recording. your hand size isn't gonna change. Now, also the positioning. How are you rapping, singing? One thing is keeping our chin up, making sure that our throat is exposed. There's a big difference from recording chin up to chin down. You can kind of tell that that voice doesn't throw as great when our chin is down. It kind of depresses our vocal cords, while having them up opens them up.
All right, so let's move on to acoustic guitar. So you're gonna wanna keep in mind that the sound coming out of the sound hole in the guitar is typically very boomy. So what we do is we place the mic right around the 12th fret, and then we actually rotate it in so it's pointing a little bit towards the sound hole. So that way you get a good balance of highs and lows, and you have a lot to work with in your DAW. So just like with vocals, observing the artist play the way they naturally play is key. If you're working with a more lively acoustic guitar player and they're sitting down, you may want to place padding, blankets, or something like that under their chair to sort of reduce those unwanted sounds. So you just got to keep in mind, these mics aren't omniscient. They're not going to move around with the player. So you might have to coach your artist on maybe curving their natural movements just a little bit.
Keep in mind that you can use a large condenser on your amp, but you need to move a little further back. An SM57 is kind of a tank. It's designed to take loud hits. That's why people use them on snare drums, kick drums, and traditionally on guitar amps, because it actually shines when you're screaming into it. First, you want to find the actual cone and the speaker within the cabinet of the amp itself. For a brighter sound, you want to angle the mic closer to the center of the cone. For a darker sound, you want to point the mic further from the center of the cone. Experiment a little and try to find that sweet spot, but it really depends on what you're going for as a producer and what your artist likes. Setup 2. This is our typical setup. We like to use 2 SM57s on the side of the cone. We like to do some takes to get a feel for how the different positions sound. But generally, you can find that sweet spot somewhere between that 0 and 45-degree angle. Option 3, you can add in a large condenser, about 4 or 5 feet from the cab, maybe a foot from the floor, like so. You want to mix these mic techniques up, maybe the amp positioning in a room, to try to find the best sound given the genre or the band or the artist that you're working with and their preferences. Let's talk about drums. Now, first of all, you can record drums with just 1 or 2 mics, but we recommend that you use at least a 4 mic setup. This is the setup that was used in the 60s, 70s. This technique has been around for a long time. It's tried and true. Keep in mind that it is difficult to mix drums, especially if you're not using a professional studio. With only a 1, 2, 3, or 4 mic setup, you're really missing out on being able to capture every individual drum hit. And in some professional studios, more than 1 mic might actually be used per drum. The snare, for example, typically mic'd above and below. With just a 4 mic setup, you can approximate that, but it's gonna take a little bit of mixing magic. So how to actually mic up the kick drum? Well, you wanna be pretty close to the sound hole. Use an SM57 about 1 inch away from the hole. The further in you go, the more attack you get, so the more actual smack of the kick. The further back, the more boomy it is and the softer the kick. So again, depending on what you're looking for in a production, experiment with that particular mic placement. The snare, use another SM57 and either mic below or above it. Again, like I mentioned earlier, some studios like to use 2 mics, but with this setup, we only have 1 option. Traditionally, people will mic at the top of the snare first, but we found that to really get that pop, it actually helps to mic under the snare. This way you get, again, that natural click, that natural pop of the snare itself, and the rest of the character gets picked up by your overheads. Next, the overheads. For your 2 large condensers, you want to use boom stands positioned above the drum set. For your right overhead, you want to position it as such kind of between the cymbals, pick a space that looks balanced above the kit to the right of the kit, pointing down towards the snare so that no one cymbal on the right is getting too much attention. And do the same thing on the left side. Usually there are gaps kind of around the cymbals and the drums where there's a balance, where you have sort of this moving average. That's kind of where you want to point the mic. But keep in mind that this varies based on how the drummer prefers the drums to be set up in the first place. The most important thing about your two overheads, though, is that they have to be equidistant from the center of the snare. That means you can take a cable, you can take a string, whatever, and you want your drummer to hold that string directly in the center of the snare and run that string to the face of each condenser. Each condenser should be exactly the same distance from the center of the snare itself. Again, this is where experimentation comes through. You might start recording drums and you notice that the kick is really boomy and it's bleeding into everything. And then you really need to figure out an option, some way of covering around the front of the kick to reduce the amount of that bleed. You also might find that your cymbals are very splashy, maybe you're getting too much of that high end, and you need to space out your large condensers a little differently. And this is where your preferences as a producer and as an artist really come in to help. Trust your ears. Remember, just like with other instruments and with vocals, it's very important to adjust your gain correctly. You want to make sure that you have enough headroom. That is, you want your drummer to play about as loud as they're going to play. You want to make sure there's no clipping.
Alright guys, so that concludes our home recording on a budget workshop. Congratulations on making this leap to becoming your own engineer. The only way we'll ever get better is if we try. That's a big thing. We may buy this equipment, we may have the nicest gear, but do you know how to use it? Are you working towards that? Becoming a better artist, a better engineer. Just music production in general requires practice. So with that, my name is Nove with Rare Sound Records. This has been a production by Tallahassee Studio Coalition and Cat Family TV. Do me a favor, like and share this post. Have a great one. Get busy recording.